In today's video, we're going to talk about how to create habits that actually stick. Be honest. How many times have you tried to start a new habit and you were consistent for maybe a couple of days or a couple of weeks, but as soon as there was an inconvenience or some type of schedule shift, you went right back to your old habits? Listen, I have been there. I have read all the books and tried all the hacks, but it wasn't until I started implementing these 3 key principles that I'm going to share with you that I've actually been able to create habits that stick. Now, before I get into those principles, we have to start off with some of the most common mistakes that most likely you're making that are the reason why your habits are not sticking. Mistake number 1, you are implementing too many habits at once. Listen, you've been trying to wake up super duper early, 4 o'clock in the morning, run a marathon, make sure that you read 10 books, drink a gallon of water all before 9 a.m. Okay, maybe you're not that extreme, but this is what most of us do. We have this desire to become a better person. We have a desire to become the best version of ourselves. But in that process, sometimes we can be a little overly ambitious. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with setting big goals. However, when it comes to habits, slow and steady wins the race. I know we're so used to this hack culture where overnight people are becoming a different person, but the truth is behind every consistent morning routine that you see on YouTube has been a bunch of years of testing, failing, testing again until they got it right. It was a slow, gradual buildup over time, and now you're seeing that final result. So we have to be mindful that habits take time to build. And when you're trying to implement too many things at once, you're setting yourself up for failure. It's one thing if you mess up one of your habits, but if you try to implement an entire routine with 6 or 7 different habits and then you don't come through on that one day, the mental and emotional toll on you is going to be so heavy. And now you're going to lose motivation that you need to keep on going. So the biggest mistake that you want to avoid is not implementing too many habits at once. And that brings me into my second mistake that you're most likely making when trying to build new habits, and that is having unrealistic timelines. Again, you cannot become a new person overnight. Right now, when I'm recording this video, it's the end of 2024, and everyone's going to try to become a new person, right? New year, new me. Listen, I have been there. But at the end of the day, if what you have been doing all year is what is going to set the foundation for how you show up next year. This month is critical, it's important, but even in this month, it still takes time for those habits to show up. So please give yourself some grace when you're implementing these new things so that you can actually cultivate lasting results. Now, the last mistake that you're most likely making when you're trying to create new habits is not having any triggers in place. Triggers are crucial when it comes to creating new habits because triggers remind us of the things that we need to do. If you're driving and you see that the light is red, that signals and triggers you to stop. If you see that the light is green, it triggers you to go. Even on your phone, triggers are super important. The apps that stand out the most are the ones that have distinctive sounds. Have you ever heard the Roku sound? When you turn on the Roku, it makes a very distinctive sound. Your text messages have different sounds to remind you that someone is texting you versus someone is calling you. Even FaceTime and regular phone calls have 2 completely different sounds to let you know where you are. These are all triggers that prompt an action. When you're not pairing a habit with a trigger, you will forget about it and it's going to be harder for you to be consistent. There's nothing to remind you to do this thing in your everyday routine, especially if you have a bunch of habits that you're trying to implement and you don't have separate triggers for all of them. What's going to happen is you're going to default back to your original state, and that's something that we want to avoid. So now that you know the mistakes to avoid when creating new habits, let's go ahead and get into these 3 things that will help you to create habits that stick. And I'm going to share with you some of the habits that I've been able to be consistent with using these methods. Now, it's important that the 3 principles I'm going to share go hand in hand. So these are things that you're going to want to apply as a total package in order to create habits that stick. Now, the first principle I want to share with you is called habit stacking. If you have read Atomic Habits, then you are familiar with this idea of habit stacking. If you're not already familiar, habit stacking is when you take a new habit that you want to build and you pair it with an existing habit that's already been established. Here's a great example of how I've done this in my own life. I knew that I needed to start exercising on a regular basis, but it just seemed like the day kept getting away from me, and no matter what time I set aside, I just kept pushing it back and skipping my workouts. So I decided to stack my morning prayer time with my morning walks. So now what I do is I get up, I go downstairs, I get on my treadmill, and I start praying in the Spirit for 30 minutes. Not only does this wake me up, but it allows me to get in that 30 minutes of exercise, which is super important for those of us who work from home because we don't be moving around a lot. So this new habit stack is really easy for me to be consistent with because number one, I never skip my prayer time. So if I don't skip my prayer time, then I won't skip my morning walks. And I tell you, that little simple change has been so efficient. So for you, think about a habit that you already have, that's already ingrained in you, that's not going to take any additional effort, and pair that new habit with your old habit. Now, when you're considering implementing habit stacking, you want to keep in mind your trigger. What is a visual or audible thing that you can use to remind yourself to do this thing? For me, I know that in order to walk, I need my Apple Watch and I need my sneakers. And even though those things can be in two different places, what's easier for me is I put my walking shoes right by my bed, right next to my Apple Watch, right next to my water bottle. So what happens is, obviously I'm getting out of bed, my feet hit the floor and touch my shoes. That's the cue to remind me to go ahead and go do my morning walk. If my shoes were in my closet and my Apple Watch was out of reach, I would most likely forget those things if I'm going downstairs. So those little triggers can make you be so much more consistent. So think about the things that you can implement, whether it's a timer, whether it's some type of visual cue, whether it's some type of sound that will trigger you to go ahead and implement your habit stacking. Now, the next principle that you want to implement when it comes to creating habits that stick is called behavior replacement. Now think for a moment about a social media app that you love to be on. For me, I used to love Instagram. And one thing that I would notice is whenever they wanted to introduce a new feature, they would put some type of icon in a place where an old icon already exists. For example, when they started creating Instagram Reels, they made sure that they put the button to create Reels in the same place that you would create a normal post. This made it easy for people to discover the new feature. Sometimes when they would implement a new feature or they would move the layout around, other times if they want you to notice a new feature, they will put an icon for that new feature exactly where the old spot used to be. And this is because people are used to clicking there, so you're not even realizing that you're clicking a new icon because your brain has been autopilot. And all of a sudden you've discovered a new feature. Now this is something that you may not have paid attention to before, but this is actually a design and marketing trick that helps people to discover new things and create new habits. They want you to discover these features, so they change the positioning to a place that you're already familiar with pressing. So with that being said, when you're looking to create habits that stick, you want to think about the behaviors and the things that you reach for that are already a part of your natural routine. For example, if you want to build a habit of drinking more water, you're going to want to put your water bottle right next to the high traffic area. That can be right on your dresser as soon as you wake up. It can be on your desk right as soon as you do your work. There's so many different places that we go to on the daily basis that we don't even realize. Let's say one of the habits that you want to build is you want to start reading the Bible more, but every time that you wake up, you start scrolling through your emails or scrolling through social media. Place your Bible in the exact place that you place your phone. That way that you will reach for your Bible first before you reach for your phone. And over time, this will start to become a new habit. The last principle that you want to implement when it comes to creating habits that stick is habit tracking. This is going to be very useful, especially if you're implementing multiple habits over time. When you're able to see your progress and keep a streak of sorts, this will help with that internal motivation. Over time, new habits become boring, and that's one of the indicators that you know that you're becoming consistent. Consistency is boring. It's not super motivating. You're not waking up trying a bunch of new things. You're implementing something over and over and over again until it changes you, it changes the way that you think, and it changes the way that you move. So habit tracking is a great way to keep that internal motivation. Everyone loves a streak. Even the Bible app has picked up the idea of streaks, encouraging you to visit here more often so that you can see your progress overall. I track my habits in my Notion template, and it's something that I do every single day, and I already have it under my to-do list, right? So in Notion, this is where I manage my life, and right under my to-do list, after I'm checking these things off, I'm also checking off my habits. I've tried to put my habit tracker in different places. I've tried paper ones. I've tried having separate apps, but I noticed that when I pair it with a high traffic area that I'm already using, I'm much more likely to be consistent with those things. Some other great habit tracking apps are, it's an actual app called Habits, and I'll leave those suggestions in the description box below. But consider adding habit tracking as a way to boost your internal motivation, and I promise you'll get excited when you're seeing your progress over time, especially when you're able to surpass those times where you fell off before. There's nothing more rewarding than that. Alrighty, now that you got the principles, let's go ahead and recap. How to create habits that actually stick. Number 1, use habit stacking. Pair a new habit that you want to build with an existing habit that you already have. Number 2, implement behavior replacement. Think about the things that you already do on a natural basis, the things that you reach for, areas that are high notice for you, and start implementing these triggers that you can pair with your habits to remind you to be consistent. And number 3, use habit tracking. Habit tracking apps, whether paper or even digital, can help you to maintain that motivation when consistency starts to become boring. Now that you have all these principles that are going to set you up for success, let me know down in the comments which habit that you're going to be implementing this year. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye!